We have the honor to have with us Mr. Джим Гуόλс, who is a senior research associate in the MIT, specialized in nuclear weapons. We have to say that, Mr. Gуόλс, it's an honor for us to talk with you.
And thank you very much. You're very kind.
You also are one of the very, very few people who have visited Iran and talk with officials about the nuclear issues. It's very important. So, because the most analysts are talking theoretically. So, you had experience in Iran. So, let's start first of all with the war. Did you expect that the negotiations would lead to the war we live right now, we face right now, or not? You believe that probably we will reach an agreement somehow with Iran or not?
Well, I think, first of all, almost all wars end at some point. I mean, the Korean War is still in an armistice, but most wars end. And I expect this one to end. Whatever end means, whether the parties sort of withdraw or whether there's actually a negotiation that results in a settlement in which each party, Iran, the US, Israel is not going to be part of this. It doesn't want to be part of a negotiation. So is there some sort of settlement in which Iran and the US each pledge to do something as part of this process of ending the active conflict? So it will end for sure. Certainly Trump cannot afford to fight a war forever in a year which has elections, midterm elections. But the question is, how do you get there? And that's going to be a difficult one. And different parties have different interests. Israel wants this war to go on for as long as it can.
Exactly.
And then for Iran, it wants it to go on long enough that it imposes sufficient costs on the U.S. that the U.S. thinks twice about coming back in 6 months or a year. So it wants this to last long enough to make at least the U.S. think twice about returning for third times. And then the U.S. has its own goals, which no one really knows what they are. You know, there's a list of them, and they shift from day to day. So right now, as of this second, it appears as if Trump wants to pursue negotiation. That's what the reporting in the U.S. suggests. But, you know, that could flip in a moment. And so we don't see the end of this war yet. It'll end, but I don't, it's not in front of us.
Since the allies, USA and Israel, have different goals, isn't it very hard to reach an agreement and a ceasefire or the end of the war? And for how long can this war last? What do you predict? How much can it take?
Well, if I was really good at predictions, I would be gambling, and I don't gamble. So I'm not going to make, I can pick an outer limit. I can't imagine the war would go on for more than 2 months. If it's gone beyond 2 months, then things have dramatically changed. That probably means the U.S. has put ground forces either on Karg Island or somewhere in Iran. You know, there are several points coming up in the near future where there'll be sort of a choice. Which way do you go? And those can lead you in very different paths, extremely different paths. And the U.S. is currently moving, 2,000 Marines, and it already has other forces in the region that will give you the option of putting ground troops in Iran. Now, I don't think Trump's going to do that, but who knows what Trump's going to do? He doesn't know what he's going to do. It shifts moment to moment. And so in that world of uncertainty, yes, we could be settled up in 2 months or less. And yes, he could, in a fit of rage or whatever, end up putting ground troops in Iran, and then that could go in different directions. But whatever the direction it will be extreme. So, you know, my prediction is I think he wants out of this. And so I think he'll find a way out of it. But, you know, there's been a lot of incompetence and a lot of confusion and a lot of other things that don't give you a lot of confidence. The first part hasn't gone well. I don't know why we'd expect the second part to go well.
So can Israel continue the war with Iran alone if USA will withdraw?
Yes, they were continuing the war against Iran before the U.S. intervention. They will continue conflict after the U.S. intervention. Now, there are the scope will change, certainly, and it will be affected by whether Trump could easily just go, I'm done, and walk away. You guys handle your own problems, in which case that's one dynamic. He could say, I'm done, but I don't want the price of oil to be high. And if Israel keeps hitting Iran, they may continue to send missiles into the Strait. And so that doesn't solve my problem. So then he points to Israel and says, you better stop doing that. Then, the question is, does Israel pay attention or not? They sort of do and don't, both.
Yes,
that's where it'll depend. But basically, Iran, just to be super clear, Israel can fly into Iran as of today anytime it wants to, right? So there's nothing constraining Israel other than a lack of resources or its own internal problems. But in a military sense, there's nothing that stops Israel from attacking Iran.
So then Israel can continue the war at the front of Lebanon and at the same time with Iran. Is it possible without the support of the USA? Because now we see that the Lebanese front now is escalating day by day.
Yeah. No, you make a good point. Certainly, Israel's a small state and maybe the most powerful state in the region, but it too has limited resources. I guess we should distinguish between what American support means. The U.S. could walk away from this conflict and say, I'm done, you guys do what you want to do. But they would continue the policy of funding and supporting Israel, right? The only way they start to pull back on that is if the U.S. says, hey, you need to stop doing this, Israel. Israel refuses, and there's a political crisis. But just like before the intervention, whether the U.S. is in the war or not, it is still going to provide military support to Israel unless there's a change in that political relationship.
So which year did you?
And so they can do it, but they can't fight forever either. I mean, there's still a limit. But you are right to say they've taken on a lot. And how long now has Israel been at war? As a country at war? Years. So there are some limits here.
So you visited Iran to discuss for the nuclear issues on behalf of the United States, of course. You testified before the United States Senate and the House of Representatives on topics related to nuclear terrorism, Iran. So which year did you visit it? Under which administration did you visit Iran? And what was the conditions there? Are they the regime, the Iranian fundamentalistic regime, a crazy one? It is a threat, a real threat, a nuclear threat. What do you think about them after your visit?
Yeah, well, that's a big question and a lot of questions. I do need to clarify one thing first. So when I have traveled to Iran and North Korea, these are during periods of time when the U.S. and those countries had no bilateral relations. They had no diplomatic relations. So when I visited them to talk to their officials about nuclear issues, I visited them not in the capacity of the U.S. government, right? I visited them as a private citizen. And a small group of us, retired officials, academics, would meet together in neutral locations to talk about the future of, the future possible relations and answers to the nuclear question, and all the way through the JCPOA. And I've met with every Iranian president since Khatami. That's more than 20 years. I've met everyone every year for at least a couple of hours.
Your experience
so I follow this as you.
Is incredible. Your experience then about Iran is incredible. You are a really specialist, a specialist.
Just showing up at just showing up is half the job here. So, But I do feel like I have a pretty, and, for both countries, and as a nuclear weapons person, having spent a lot of time on both countries, I do think I have a feel for it. So you have lots of questions in this. Was Iran a threat? I think you have to ask to whom Iran is a threat. Right now, they're really not a threat to anyone, in part because they were so significantly degraded. Now, even prior to that, let's say when the Hamas war started, right? Iran was a weak power. Iran has no air force. It has no force projection. Israel has airplanes. Israel has missiles. Israel has the US and the Europeans. And so Iran was not looking to start a fight. Each of these things that had happened, this war, the war in June, and the previous exchanges were not initiated by Iran. Iran has tried to keep its head down as it navigates a very serious internal situation. There are protests at home, as you well know. The economy, because of sanctions and other reasons, is under great duress, which has a lot to do with the protests, not all of it, but a lot of it. And in any case, they're not looking to start a fight. We started the fight. So as far as a regular old conventional war, one country attacks another country, Iran was not a threat to either Israel or the United States. The issue that people often make a lot of is the nuclear issue, which I am was intimately involved in. You'll remember that we had a nuclear agreement, the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
And Trump stepped out.
Trump pulled out. And I will add that every national intelligence agency for the different countries had assessed that Iran was in compliance with that agreement, right? There was no cheating. Then Iran rips it up and punishes the countries who stay in the agreement. He doesn't just walk out, he tries to kill the agreement through sanctions. Then he launches a war. Now, when we were under the JCPOA, we knew a lot about Iran's nuclear program, and we could have confidence it was not engaged in building a weapon. U.S. intelligence has said since 2007, that Iran has not made a decision to build nuclear weapons. It made a decision to acquire that capability as a sort of, option if things fall apart, but it had not made the bomb decision. So that's why the JCPOA sort of worked pretty good. It kept them, they were not going for the bomb, and this made sure that if they did, we would know. Trump tears it up. They start putting pressure on the US by increasing their enrichment. What happens? Trump attacks them. In my view, as a political scientist who has studied these things, there's a very good chance that this has increased the risk that Iran will become a nuclear weapon state. Attacking them will provoke the very thing you say you're trying to prevent. Because now Iran is defenseless. It has no allies. China and Russia have walked away. Its friends are weakened. It has nothing else. Its enemies can bomb it anytime it wants. And you've just attacked them. When you do that, that's a situation in which going for the bomb will make a lot of sense to them in a context in which they're angry for having been attacked and their leader being killed. So you can say there was a nuclear threat, and I oppose all proliferation and all nuclear weapons because Iran had a nuclear capability that they had not acted on, but they had that capability. But what you've done is pushed them over the edge towards a decision to get nuclear weapons because now they have nothing else left. So I think, the threat here is the threat caused by the war. That's the big nuclear threat. Now will we have pushed a country that was this close to the bomb just over the edge?
Because till now we're hearing all the time from USA and from Israel that there is a nuclear threat from Iran, there is a nuclear threat, and you, a specialist who have visited so many times Iran, testified that there was not nuclear threat at all. So tell me something now. For how long can Iran alone fight? for how long can be opposite to Israel and to USA, of course, and close the Strait of Hormuz? How long can keep this stance? Because it seems that does not want to negotiate. So it's a big challenge right now, what is happening for Iran and for the Iranian regime. So what do you foresee? How long with the means that it has, the missiles, the drones, I don't know what, can continue the fight?
Well, again, I'm not good at predicting the future, but I would say the idea of how long it goes on, your question is predicated on the idea that this depends on how long Iran can hang in there, right? Yeah, and that's true. That's true. But it's also true that the other sides, there are questions about whether the other sides can achieve their objectives. So you can blow up a lot of things in Iran, right? And that's punishment. But that doesn't mean punishment means you're winning your objectives. Like Iran is a country of 91 million people. This to them is a fight for survival. They'll fight as long as they have to, right? Who wants to go and start a land war in a country of 91 million people? That would be really foolish. So if you're not going to do that, and you're the outside power, how do you achieve your objectives? And that's the problem the US and Israel are now confronting. Trump thought that Iran would throw up its hands after 2 days and say, I'm sorry, I give up. And he didn't prepare for what happened. Anyone could have told him, I'm sure everyone told him that this was what was going to happen, and he ignored it. Now, the objective, as you rightly say, for Iran minimally will be to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. I think they can do that for a long time. They don't have to hit every ship. All they have to do is fire enough missiles so that private tanker owners say, I'm not going to take that chance. So it's manipulating the psychological risk. And you don't need to militarily kill all the ships. You just need to make it risky for the ship owners. And building missiles is at the low end of the manufacturing scale. I'm sure they had lots of missile parts buried, and I'm sure, are busily reconstituting them. Now, the rate at which they're firing missiles has declined through the course of the war, but they're still firing them. And the one they fired at towards Europe, the intermediate range missile, was sort of a surprise. So I think they're going to be able. This is not a high bar to build missiles and drones. Countries can do that, especially countries of 91 million people. So I think they can build enough, restock enough to cause enough doubt that the strait stays closed, which is why this is a difficult problem for the US. Are you going to go in and actually take over the whole country? I don't think you are. So how is it that you're going to achieve your objective? That's what they didn't prepare for, and now they're stuck as they contemplate how to get out of it.
Despite the military superiority of Israel and USA, can still Iran win the war, like we saw happen, for example, in Vietnam or in Iraq? They didn't win the war, the big powers. And on the other hand, if we see boots on the ground, American boots on the ground, would that cause a backfire? Because we know that Iran is not Israel, is not Gaza Strip, is not Ukraine. It's huge, and we know that there is underground infrastructures that we don't know. Nobody knows yet.
Yeah. Well, I would say, certainly Israel is not going to put boots on the ground unless it's a special operation where they grab something and run. So the U.S. is the only player with the forces big enough to actually be able to consider put it, in a more, for weeks at a time, let's say, if not longer, ground troops. I think that would change the nature of the whole thing. It's hard to see how that comes out well. As to who wins, and I think Ukraine is a good example here. Russia was completely so much more powerful than Ukraine. But Ukraine was a big country, and it was fighting for its survival. And the U.S. is a much more advanced military country than Iran, but Iran is a country of 91 million people. And now when Trump said unconditional surrender, he has made this a fight for survival. Countries fight very hard to survive. So I would say in the case of Ukraine, and I would say in the case of Iran, if they survive, they've sort of won. Like they won. And I would say in relative terms, they won while at the same time the U.S. did not achieve its objectives. So they sort of met their objective and the U.S. did not meet its objective. But in the end, they all lost, of course, right? Iran's getting pummeled. We could be on a path towards an Iranian nuclear weapon as a result of having attacked them. The future looks terrible. How is Iran and Saudi Arabia? What are they going to think about each other in the region going forward? Remember, there was this rapprochement, which I never really believed in, but at least that bitter rivalry had settled down these last couple of years. Now you have the Crown Prince on the phone telling Trump to attack. When the U.S. leaves, what is that relationship like going forward? So there's nothing but destruction and awfulness. But
So, yes,
Iran
but
will survive, and so they'll be the winner, I guess.
so, and also the regime, the Iranian regime, because they are preparing the Pahlavi son to take over from
Yeah.
USA, etc. Do you think that the regime will survive, has the capacity to survive, and the inner, how can we say that, immunity to survive?
Well, yes, right. It survived a lot so far, but I can tell you that political scientists are terrible at predicting when a regime is going to collapse. They're great at explaining it afterwards, but they're terrible about predicting it in advance. Now, if we were looking at this scientifically or in a business way, we would say, well, what has happened in the past? What's the probability of it happening in the future? The regime has survived a lot. Now, they are in as bad a shape as they've ever been. Their economy is bad, anger at home, although the war has probably changed that dynamic somewhat. A lot of the leadership's been removed. So you could say, is it teetering or not? The thing is, I don't see how anything has changed. Like, why is the regime suddenly going to lose power? How does that actually happen? The last time we had mass protests, the government used force and killed a lot of people. And because as, sort of the definition of a government in most circumstances is they have a monopoly on the use of force. They own the guns. So it's easier for them to stay in power absent some alternative. And, certainly in the near term, we could get a coup, or you could get a military coup, but if
By
the
whom?
regime,
By whom?
lasted so far.
Sorry, by whom a coup, a military coup? By Pahlavi? Because Pahlavi does not have army to support him
No. I
in
mean
Iran.
the Revolutionary
Okay.
Guard, right? So right now it's run by the supreme leader. I don't see any prospect for a popular uprising. I don't see how it works. Like, tell me the story how all these people take over the government. The way that would have to happen is if the IRGC and the militias refuse to fire on civilians, and they didn't refuse last time. So what, I don't know what's changed. So I think the coup line would be, they have a interesting Republican form of government. There's the supreme leader who's elected by the Assembly of Experts. The Revolutionary Guard is dedicated to the supreme leader, and then powers distributed throughout the government. But the head of the IRGC could say, in the face of a weakened supreme leader, I'm taking over. That happens. It happened in Pakistan. It happened in South Korea. Those things happen.
So right now, Iran is not a nuclear threat. Who consists a nuclear threat at this moment internationally?
Well, all the countries that own nuclear weapons are a nuclear threat. So that's the US and Russia and Britain and France, China, Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. They're all nuclear threats because the existence of nuclear weapons means that some human being can press a button out of error or anger or miscalculation and destroy a city. Sometimes just destroy a country that has one city, one major city in it. So I think those are all threats. I've always thought that the countries that have nuclear threats have nuclear weapons are a greater threat than the ones that might get nuclear weapons, although that's all we ever seem to talk about. We only talk about proliferation, like, will that country over there get nuclear weapons? Like, we have countries that have nuclear weapons. They're the threats because they have them.
So do you think that the taboo of nuclear weapon is being surpassed right now? We overcome it, and maybe we will see the use of nuclear weapon at this historical moment, or not?
Well, I don't know. I would say, of course, it's possible. It's possible every day that you get nuclear use, right? And we're going to be surprised. We think we know everything. We don't know anything. And so when the nuclear war happens, everyone's going to go, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Who could have ever seen that coming? Which is complete nonsense. Anyone could see it coming because if you own them, you will use them. Eventually, you will use them. Now, that basic probability is now being nudged along by the fact that the international system is falling apart, the alliance system is falling apart. When, countries that are U.S. allies that are protected by U.S. nuclear umbrella are going to begin to wonder, what am I going to do here if this guy walks out on me? We have more conflicts. War is very bad. War and nuclear weapons are very bad mix. So we have one nuclear weapon state, Russia, fighting a nuclear war next to NATO, which is a nuclear weapons entity. We have Israel and the U.S., nuclear weapons, fighting a war in a nuclear threshold state, Iran. All that is pushing those risks further along. So to have them is to be at risk. But the world conditions are moving in the wrong direction.
So the last question refers to Greece. Do you think that Greece is under threat by Iran because Greece participated at the interception of Iranian missiles at the Hormuz Strait recently? So do you think that we will have bad implications and we can be a target for from the Iran?
Well, first of all, let me say something that you don't know, and then you can edit this out. Greece actually considered acquiring nuclear weapons. Both Greece and Turkey, back in the day, decades ago, actually, those governments made decisions to explore nuclear weapons option. But that's a historical aside. As for Greece's participation in operations in the Gulf, does that make them a target?
Yeah.
In principle, yes, right? If someone's helping my enemy, then they should be a target. So in principle, yes. As a practical matter, probably not, just because there are a lot of other more important targets that Iran has that are closer to home. Iran sending that intermediate missile this week towards Europe was sending a signal. But I don't think it wants to. Things are bad enough for them as it is. They don't need to, make things worse for the post-war period. They need to have a plan for the post-war period. They'll be unhappy with you, but I don't think you're going to be a target. And they've got, as they say in the U.S., bigger fish to fry. They have countries in their own neighborhood, and those are the countries that are going to be their focus.
Can we say the same thing for Cyprus?
Probably, yes. I mean, I think you both Cyprus and Greece are part of Europe. So there really is some sort of line there. And the difference would be, let's say Greece sends a naval ship and it's doing something that is in support of the U.S. mission. Well, that's that, Iran is free to attack that and sink that ship, right? That's different than like sending a missile at you, even though it's all sort of tied together in a military logic. As a political matter, attacking Greece in Europe would represent a big escalation, I think.
Mhm.
Or
So,
Cyprus, whatever, any member of the EU.
so we can conclude that Donald Trump has regretted for the war. And what if the Democrats had right now the presidency? Do you think that we would have avoided this war?
Well, again, based on historical record, yes, right? Because both Republican and Democratic presidents prior to Trump had been in situations where they considered military strikes against Iran and rejected those strikes, and situations where Israel was proposing military strikes on its own, and the U.S. president said no, like you don't do that. That was true of Obama and George W. Bush. So Republican and Democrat alike thought using military force against Iran was a terrible idea. It's only Donald Trump that has decided that this was a good idea. And now I think even he is having second thoughts.
So, do you think that right now Iran has challenged his power, Trump's power?
Yes, I mean, again, these questions are always best when they're attached to a particular country and a particular objective, right? So, for some country, so Trump is taking a hit here, right? So the thing is, he might respond a bunch of different ways, and it's very hard to predict what way he's going to respond. So you don't know if that response is going to hurt you or help you. Trump, the thing that I emphasize to people, because we've had decades of a mental image in our heads, and we are prisoners of this mental image. And the mental image is that US presidents are acting on policy or ideology or their party platform.
Yes.
A set of ideas that they believe and feel strongly about, tied to U.S. interests, whatever, or to ideology. That is not Donald Trump. He has no ideology. He has no policy. He has no real preferences. It's really a personality-based leader who decides on emotions. And a very small pool of people, most of whom will say yes to whatever he says. And we see that in other places. That's true in Russia. It's true in other places. This is the setup here. And so what matters is not policy. It's, what he thinks. That's why he goes back and forth and gets angry and tweets something ridiculous in the middle of the night and then changes it the next day. We are not dealing with that. We're dealing with a personality who will jump back and forth. So who benefits? Yeah, I think the Democrats probably benefit, but what country benefits? Who knows what he's going to do next? And you still have to be sort of cautious, right? Let's say you're China, you're whoever. Trump is tearing up the U.S. from the inside. He's doing all those things, but you got to be careful that he'll make some bad mistake involving you. And so, yes, he could have a weakening of power, but it's not clear how that works out.
So will Cuba be the next target of Donald Trump and his gang?
You think so, but I think he's going to face a conflicting choice here. If Iran goes badly, and let's just say it badly is sort of what it is now, plus or minus, right? You didn't achieve your objectives. Price of energy went up. This was not a win for you. No one is saying this is a win for Trump. Let's say it just ended tomorrow, just like that.
Yes.
So is he going to look for a cheap and easy win? Does that make Cuba more attractive? Now, I don't think this was the mistake the last time. All these leaders, Putin thought Ukraine was going to be cheap and easy and quick. And Trump thought Iran would be cheap and easy and quick. So if you believe that, that's how you get yourself in trouble. But you could see them sort of doubling down and going for Cuba, or you could see, hey, like I just got burned by this. Maybe I need to back off for a little while and focus on some other things like the economy or whatever. So, I don't have a definitive answer. I could see how it would be attractive or not, but they're on a bad string. Now, the other thing is the people around him, Marco Rubio obviously is a Cuba hawk. And he has two roles. He's Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. But I would guess in the White House, if Iran is seen as a loss, then the people who opposed it probably get a bigger voice now than they did before. Like the Hawks went in and said, let's do Iran, let's do Iran. Trump says, okay, let's do Iran. And then it goes badly. Well, those guys, maybe their advice carries a little less weight right now. And the folks who are cautious may carry a little more weight.
So, Mr. Gουόλς, we thank you so much for this interview.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for letting me go on and on.